This is TWiT.
This episode of Tech Break is brought to you by our friends at IT Pro TV, now called ACI Learning. 94% of CIOs and CISOs agree that attracting and retaining talent is increasingly critical. Invest in your workforce and keep their IT skills current with ACI Learning. Visit go.acilearning.com/TWiT. TWiT listeners can receive up to 65% off an IT Pro Enterprise Solution Plan after completing their form. Based on your team's size, you'll receive a properly quoted discount tailored to your needs. So, yeah, I thought really, everything we had heard, the rumors were all true, by the way, except for the things like there's going to be an iPad mini. There were MacBooks and there was an iMac. And there's an M3. We're going to get to all the deets on that. But there were two, I thought, surprises that nobody knew about. One, black or space black. Now, Jason, you saw it. How did you see it?
I went to New York and got a briefing yesterday morning with Apple.
Holy cow.
Got to get my hands on them, and I got to try to make fingerprints on the space black and all of that. And yeah, so I'm here
just before.
I'm ready to report back. I got to use this stuff, and there was 10 hours when I knew about it. Nobody else did. But
wow.
That time is over now.
So you were in between the last week and this week. You were in New York. Wow, that's awesome.
Like yesterday, I was in New York.
Okay.
And now I'm back. Boy, my arm's tired. Yeah, it's gray. It's dark gray. I saw a lot of people last night. They were really excited about the fact that they did a laptop in black. It's like, oh man, can you imagine? It's like, yeah. It's not what you're thinking of. You may like it. The darker gray, the better, but it is still a metallic gray. It's not as dark as the Midnight MacBook Air, so just don't get too excited.
Wait a minute, it's not as dark as the Midnight Air?
No, not even close.
So the Air is the darker of the two?
By far.
Well, yes. I thought initially that this is a very smart move for Apple because you can only get it if you get a M3 Pro or Max. So it's kind of like a status symbol, right? Well, you must have a nice MacBook because you've got it in black. But if it's not as black as the Midnight Blue,
I want Apple to come out with and talk about a revolutionary process to embed Vanta Black into.
I'm thinking Vanta Black. Why isn't it Vanta Black? Why isn't it blacker than black? There's no blacker. Why not?
I think if they do that, they should at least be good sports and turn off that feature where if something is reported as lost, it becomes useless again. Because a Vanta Black MacBook is designed to be left behind and lost.
Stealth
it should be like an Easter egg hunt for people who say, you know what, before I leave this Starbucks, I'm just going to be looking at the back of every seat just to see if somebody forgot a $3,000 notebook.
Let me quote Jason Snell from sixcolors.com.
Ooh.
I got my greasy monkey paws on a space black laptop and can report that Apple's as good as its word in the sense it seems generally more resistant to fingerprints and other smudges. They said they have a special anodization process on the black.
Yes.
But I don't want to exaggerate this feature. You can still see fingerprints. They're just not as prominent.
Exactly. Yeah. Joanna Stern from the Wall Street Journal and I both were together. We were putting our hands on that thing and trying to get it fingerprinty, and
that's pretty funny.
Apple is not making a claim that they have created a fingerprint-free surface. They're not doing that. I think that people can run away with this, just like with the black, where in that case they're saying it's black and it's not black. It's just space gray.
I'm so disappointed.
But the fingerprint thing, it is better. Like I have a Midnight MacBook Air. The fingerprint thing, they absolutely have made this new. They did something chemically in the anodization seal that repels liquid, including oil, from your fingerprints.
Nice.
So it's less.
Still fingerprints.
It's not gone. Right. It's a little like how they do the thing where it's like, hey, we improved the glare resistance on our screens. Like there's still glare. There's just less of it. This is like the fingerprint oil repulsion chemistry is better than it's been, but make no mistake, you can leave fingerprints on it and you will. They'll just be less prominent than they were before, which is great.
It's fingerprint resistant, not proof.
Yes, exactly. More fingerprint resistant than in the past. Yeah. And so that's nice. But again, and I don't want to shame anybody. If you like a dark gray laptop, go to town. This is a darker gray laptop than the last dark gray laptop. I just want to be clear that when Apple says space black, you may be thinking of, the blackness of space.
Yeah.
I reassure you now, it's just dark gray. Okay. It's not, it's just dark gray, metallic, dark gray. That's it.
I gotta wonder what the limitation is. Like we've all been watching like manufacturers long enough to know that white is not easy. Black is not easy. Whatever you think is easy to do in the trade dress of a device, it's not easy. I wonder if that is, they made a conscious decision that they do not want this to be like the cover of a Spinal Tap album. How much blacker could this be? The answer is none. Or if they that was as black as they could possibly make it consistently, so to make sure that the first one is as the same color as the 100,000th one. Or if they decide they looked at it in that sort of, again, blacker than black trade dress and said, let's take it back a couple of shades because you can't see the contours of the machine very well, and we're very proud of the look of this device.
So this is not the first black MacBook, but it's the first in quite some time. When was
but again,
it's not black.
It's not black. It's just, I just want to be clear. There was a black MacBook back in the day. The Midnight MacBook Air is pretty close to black, but this thing is not. Yeah, Andy's got one, but this is not that. This is a dark gray. It's a dark metallic gray.
What is that, Andy? Is that the actual? That's the painted black
MacBook.
one.
Poly.
No. That's like the vintage. This was.
Yeah, they painted it black. Yeah. I remember I paid $200 extra for that.
Yeah, it's good. I love that one. But matte black, no less.
That's actually black. This is not.
And it's plastic.
And it's plastic.
I think it has something to do with the anodization process that Apple likes to use, that they're using anodized aluminum. They're very comfortable with it. They're very good at it. I think they feel actually that part of their trade dress is metallic, right? Metallic aluminum laptop is what a MacBook is. And so I think they're not going to go to a different material. And I think maybe below a certain, I don't know whether there's a physical limitation or whether they're just not happy with the results or whether they feel it doesn't feel metallic enough. But like clearly there's, they'll get a little darker. I mean, we are talking about,
you could get a D brand skin that's black.
Sure, exactly. But for
black.
like Apple's stock, what they want, they've gone a little bit darker and they've called it black. And again, I don't think this is a scandal or anything. I just want to be clear. People are going to be disappointed if they think it's black and they order it and they get it, because what they're going to get is a dark metallic gray. It's darker than space gray. We held a space gray laptop up to the space black laptop, and I mean, it's darker. Here's what I'll say about space black. In a well-lit room without context, if there's a laptop sitting on a table, if it's silver or space gray, I think you maybe can't tell the difference. You have to see them next to each other. Otherwise, they're pretty close. Even though space gray is darker, you would not mistake space black for those other laptops. It is that much darker, but it's just not black. It's so buyer beware.
It's
if
hysterical,
you're
though.
full-on Darth Vader, you're not going to get it.
You have to get a Pro or a Max to get the black. Otherwise,
well, that's the story of the day, right? Is that they got rid of the 13-inch MacBook Pro and replaced it with a $1,599 low-end 14-inch MacBook Pro, which is very exciting and I think a great move. But to get it to $1,599, it doesn't do a lot of stuff.
Well, wait,
right?
It has 8 gigs of RAM to get it to.
It has 8 gigs of RAM.
8 gigs of RAM is like, that's
right. It's missing a USB port on the one side because it's using the M3 processor, which has fewer lanes. It doesn't support 2 external displays. It is, but I would argue it has the best feature of being a 14-inch MacBook Pro, which is the screen. That ProMotion bright screen is gorgeous. And what it does is, although it's a lesser MacBook Pro, what it's not is that 13-inch MacBook Pro that was from 7 years ago and had a touch bar and was completely out of place in the lineup. So now it's a compromised, decontented $1,599 MacBook Pro, but it is a true 14-inch beautiful screen MacBook Pro, even though it's got those limitations and does not come in space black.
It is the end of the line for the touch bar. I was so surprised to see from a number of sources a lament, an ode to the touch bar, like, oh, we really liked it. We didn't admit it, but we really liked it.
No,
we didn't.
We did not like it at all.
Yeah.
One guy said, if you're a touch typist, you kept hitting it by accident, but I learned not to. And for people who weren't touch typists, it was great. Well, it's like, come on, really?
It was a fine idea, but I mean, if it became if it became a way for third-party developers to say, by the way, we feel as though as a human interface thing, the idea of putting bespoke function keys that are bespoke for each app directly over the keyboard, which is the one fixed part of the interface, we think that's a flexible thing to do. But from the moment that I started typing on that first demo unit and it started suggesting autocorrection, like I type TH and then now the taskbar says, "Oh, do you want to type therefore?" Like, are you? I mean, I wanted to ask the engineers that I know are very, very smart, and I know that there's a lot of discussion. Did you really think I'm going to take my hands off a physical keyboard to navigate towards this tiny little? There was never a good reason for this thing to exist. It's one of the hallmarks of what I think is probably the worst Mac that Apple ever made.
Yeah, it is part of a bad era of Apple stuff.
Butterfly keyboard and touch bar.
The most telling thing about it, I think, is like, I get the impulse was, let's use our multi-touch savvy to build a Mac product that uses multi-touch, but they put it on the keyboard plane where you're really not looking with your eyes ideally. And then the truest sign of Apple's organizational dysfunction is when they ship the touch bar, the software for the touch bar essentially was never updated. Yeah. The next Mac OS version came out, no changes. They never changed it. So it feels, and when I say dysfunctional, I mean somebody in the hardware group thought this was a good idea. And it's clear that the people who wrote Mac software in Mac OS itself did not think it was a good idea and invested no effort in ever making it anything other than what it was at launch. And that is broken, right? Like, why did you make this thing if you were never going to try to improve it? And the answer is, I guess that the people who made it had a complete disconnect. It speaks so much about how broken the Mac was in the late 2010s. It's a perfect example.
The fact that they didn't do enough testing to make people realize that even in the first generation of these Macs, the escape key was also part of the touch bar. They'd done away with a mechanical escape key, not knowing how many people actually rely on that for so many of their tasks, that to make that a soft key just makes every single operation that much more painful. I mean, if we ever got together to do a special report, I think that we should do just a show just on that first generation of that new MacBook, because every single decision, it's the George Costanza MacBook. Every choice they made was wrong. Including, hey, here's the Pro MacBook for our Pro users. We decided to remove the SD card slot. Well, why did you do that? One word: courage. Yeah. No. I don't think that was it. But I remember I remember them saying that. Well, we feel that the pros aren't using SD memory cards anymore. They're using Wi-Fi to connect. Are you high?
Yeah. Well, it's actually the same thing as saying, oh, well, nobody needs a physical escape key, as if they weren't aware. Clearly there was a talk about your dysfunction and disconnect. They were unaware of how people used their Macs, apparently, how pros use their Macs to make these things. They were justifying weird decisions. It was such a broken time. So, and again, I think, could the touch bar have been made better and more useful? I think it was never going to be a great thing, but they could have tried. They never even let third parties tie into it, right? They never did anything, and that is the most broken thing of all, is that they shipped this thing and then they immediately essentially abandoned it. I don't get it.
And
terrible.
The real issue was the amount of mistypes that you had with it was so frustrating that, and I don't know, that was the thing to fix, because I probably would have grown to like certain things on the touch bar, but all I was up against all the time was constantly accidentally hitting something, and it was just no, that's not what I wanted. Oh, why did that just happen? There was a lot of you're not even conscious to it, and your computer would just do something crazy, and you're just I don't understand what just happened. And then I realized that all the things I didn't understand were just the touch bar, and then you just grow to hate it. And that was I think that was one of the issues.
So moving on to the present.
There's a lot of pent up hate about that.
We're just really angry.
R.I.P.
We're really angry.
These are people in pain.
Our era, the long national nightmare is over, everybody.
It is interesting, though, that all the hollering that Apple should do a touch screen MacBook seems to have disappeared.
It's around.
Is it? I have touch screen laptops using Windows and Linux, and honestly, I don't think I care. And
I have a bad habit. If I spend too much time on my iPad,
then you touch the screen.
A tendency to touch the screen. I'm sitting there typing, and then I touch it, and I go, I can't do that. Yeah.
So anyway, let's move on to the present, because honestly, there's lots to talk about. But goodbye. We hardly knew ye, touch bar.
Really?
There is a little hate for an 8 gigabyte RAM. Is there any reason? I mean, obviously you wanted to get a $15.99 price point. I added, by the way, 16 gigs of RAM. Let's go back to 512 because that's fine. No longer the 256 gig option on the base model.
Right.
And they were almost at pains to show dual RAM chips so that they don't have that RAM problem that the older ones had.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So if I put in 16 gigs, it's $200. That's $17.99. That's the real
it's still
price.
Not $2,000, right? Like the first thing here is their problem was they can't just say MacBook Pro starts at $2,000,
Right.
and that was why that 13 was with Touch Bar was still around. But now they can say $15.99 for a starting price, and I think they know there are probably two buyers for that low end model. There are the kind who don't care and will buy it with 8 gigs of RAM. And you know what? The people who don't care are probably going to be okay.
Yeah.
And then they're going to be the people who do care, and they're going to give Apple a couple $100 more, and Apple likes that too.
Right.
And so that's how they'll do it. But even when you configure it a little bit higher, you're still under $2,000. So you're still able to get that screen and get a modern MacBook Pro under $2,000. I expect that Apple is also hoping, at least, we'll see what happens, that some of the people who are buying that 13-inch MacBook Pro because they just, damn it, it had to be a MacBook Pro, whether it's people or corporations, some of them at $15.99 will buy the MacBook Pro, and then others will look at it and go, well, I could get this nice 15-inch MacBook Air, big screen, a little bit cheaper, and it's good enough, right? And I think that maybe Apple's expecting they're going to spread those 13-inch MacBook Pro buyers across the 13, 15 Airs and this new $15.99 laptop, depending on their price sensitivity.
On the other end, if you max out the 16-inch MacBook Pro with an M3 Max, 128 gigs of RAM, and a very expensive 8 terabyte solid-state drive, you get up to $7,200. So that's the range, $15.99 to $71.99.
Yeah, and at $71.99, you're basically putting. I wrote about this when the first M1 MacBook Pros came out. It's like you're basically putting a Mac Pro in your backpack at that point, right? Like, and one of the stories of today that we should talk about at some point in this show is how they're differentiating the 3 chips, because it looks like they put their foot on the gas of the Max chip, whereas the Pro chip has sort of been turned into a mid-range chip, which is really interesting. But they know that there are, if you listen to their language last night, it was very much like, for the most demanding users. And I really believe that's where they're headed with that Max chip is, really, like the name says, max it out, make it as performant as possible, because the people are, and it's super expensive, but it's also super powerful. And so the people who really, really want the very best and that Mac Pro performance in their backpack, they're going to spend $7,000 on a laptop and they're going to be happy about it. But I suspect most MacBook Pro buyers will be buying the M3 Pro instead.
And I don't know if that drive is as fast as, I don't know if the drive is as fast as it is in the studio, but if it's 5 gigs, then you want to put as much. I used to be like, I'll never get more than a terabyte of hard drive space. And I really screwed up when I bought my studio that way, because I just didn't realize how fast that internal drive is. And so if you're out there capturing, raw 6K or 8K footage or 4K footage, and you want to edit 6 or 7 of those, layers together, you do need that drive speed and you do need that power. And if you're doing it on the road, if you're a creator doing it on the road, you will need that speed. And the $7,200 will not be a big deal, to do that. So it's great that it will scale up to that. I do say, like my wife does not need more than 8 gigs of RAM. Like, she doesn't do enough to,
well, she probably doesn't need a MacBook Pro. She probably needs an Air anyway, right?
Yeah, but if you want
fine.
that, if you want that gorgeous
Air is fine.
XDR screen, right? Like, I really believe that the screen is the number one feature on those laptops. So you're like, I don't really need more than 8 gigs of RAM, but I want a beautiful 14-inch XDR screen for my video watching and all that. Like, $15.99, it's there.
And also the number of USB-C connections is more on the Pro, and that can add up, I believe. Isn't it the same?
No, on the low end, on that M3 Pro, because it's the M3 chip, it is limited by, so no support for 2 external displays, right? Because it's got the one built-in display, it'll only drive one, and the that extra USB port on the left side of the computer is not there on that low end system. It's
for
not
some reason
there.
I thought it used to have the pros. Used to have
a memory
servers on
bandwidth
both sides.
But
is
all the
actually
pros
lower.
Yeah.
So you're
And
gonna.
so
this is if you are speccing out a new MacBook, you actually really are going to want to pay attention because they've actually given up some performance in some regards.
Right. So the low end SKUs that have this M3 are missing that port, and because it's an M3, right? And it's just like on the 13-inch MacBook Pro and on the MacBook Airs, where the M1 and M2 have the same limitation. So the M3 will drive one external display. The M3 Pro will drive two. The M3 Max will drive, I think, 4.
Up to 6K. I mean, really a lot of performance.
Yeah, so it really scales. But you're right, Leo. One of the quirks, like the M3 Pro chip, has fewer performance cores than the M2 Pro chip did.
Yeah.
They actually, it's 6 performance cores, and really performance scales with performance cores. So they're giving back performance and then getting it back just in the M3 being more efficient. But like they are clearly kind of like repositioning that chip as this mid-range chip for that. Honestly, most pros don't need more power than that, so they're okay with it. But you are losing that. And then, as you pointed out, the memory bandwidth is actually less than on the M2 Pro, because again, the Pro used to feel like it was the Max's little buddy. And it doesn't feel like that anymore. The Max is like going into the stratosphere, and it's going to be much more expensive, but into the stratosphere. And the Pro is kind of like inching back toward the M3 as a mid-range chip. So it's the first time we've really seen this kind of different
And this is probably what it's going to be going forward. They've decided to make a stronger differentiation between Pro and Max.
Well, I think they know, right? They know that the bulk of their Pro users don't need all those features of the Max, but they know that their high-end users do. And what do you do in that case? And the answer is you got to differentiate, right? Because that high-end chip's super expensive. But some people are like, $7,000 for a laptop. I don't care. Give me the max performance. I think that's the Alex Lindsay. Right. But the Pro, like a lot of people that are kind of in the mid-range, like they want more than the M3, but they don't need a max, right? So they're trying to make that something that is more affordable or has the right margins for Apple, that they can make in bulk, and that the bulk of the MacBook Pros are going to go with that one. So I think that's why they're doing it this way, so that they can please your general purpose pro-ish user who wants to spend $3,000, $2,000 on a laptop, and still please the people who are going to buy that M3 Max. And let's not forget, in the $7,000 laptop, but they're also going to buy it in the Mac Studio. They're going to buy it as an Ultra in the Mac Pro.
An Ultra would be really just 2 Maxes glued together.
It's 2 Maxes.
Yeah.